Improv comedy is a supportive and collaborative type of theater where a group of performers work together to make everything up in the moment. There's no script, but there are guidelines, depending on the type of improv. If you've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, then you've seen what's called short-form improv, which consists of shorter games. There's also long-form improv, which is more like a play where you're watching scenes between clearly defined characters. It's about the relationships between the characters. With that in mind, please enjoy the following program. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah McDonough. Today I'll be chatting with 3 performers and teachers from Dreamcatcher Rep about improv comedy. Dreamcatcher Rep is a theater company in residence at Oak Center in Summit. Its year-long season includes plays, improv comedy, a summer youth program, as well as outreach and education programs for youth, adults, and seniors. Joining me today is Laura Ekstrand, Dave Malbec, and Lulu French.
Hello.
And thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear more about your individual background as performers and teachers.
Wow.
Where are we going to start? Gee.
I was joking beforehand that mine would take like 10, 15 minutes. So. But I'll try to keep it brief. So I moved to New York City a long time ago to attend the American Musical and Dramatic Arts Academy. I was going to be a musical theater performer. And after I graduated, I did perform professionally for a couple of years, but then I remember it was 1997 because that's when I took my first improv class, and that is also when I met my now husband. So like we both have been improvising and have stayed together now for 23 years. So we were at Gotham City Improv, which is now unfortunately defunct, but we were there for a long time. We ran programs, we taught classes. I also studied at UCB back in the beginning, so I got to study with Amy Poehler and a couple of the other original members of UCB. And I spent some time at the Magnet, which is where I met Dave Malbec like 10, 11 years ago. So I was performing there. And I've had the opportunity to also perform at the People's Improv Theater. But I've been teaching for about 20 years now, and I have the honor and privilege of teaching for Dreamcatcher Rep.
So my name is Dave Malbec. I am an actor and an improviser. I went to the Post Theater Conservatory on Long Island, where I got majored in acting and theater. And then there was an improv team at that school, and I'd done like a little improv in high school with drama club or whatever, and I was a big fan of like Whose Line Is It Anyway. But yeah, in college is where I first heard about like long form and like the idea of like long form improv, and so that was where I sort of got introduced to that. And then, at some point, post-college, I started producing my own comedy, sketch, improv, and stand-up show called Comedy. And that was sort of before the improv theater phenomena hit New York City. I think the Magnet was like just opening maybe when we were producing that. And then eventually, I ended up taking classes at the Magnet, and I was on several of their teams there. I coached a bunch of teams. I taught some classes there. Then I went to California for a little while to pursue acting, and I studied at the Groundlings in Los Angeles for a bit. Sort of got their taste of that. I continue to, be an actor in New York, and I teach, and I'm a company member at Dreamcatcher Rep with Laura Ekstrand.
What a segue! So I'm Laura Ekstrand. I'm the artistic director of Dreamcatcher, and we've been around 25 years this year, and I think it was in about 2003, maybe, that we started doing improv, and it came from Dave. He was, a company member, as he said, and he had been doing improv, and he said, let's just give this a shot. So we tried it, and it just really clicked with the company and with the audience, and we've been doing it ever since. So I have to say, before that, most of my improv training was part of acting training. It was like improv in rehearsal to develop a character, to understand the story better, that kind of thing. So comedy improv was actually brought to me by these 2 people. So over the years, I really feel like my training has been working with them.
Yeah.
And that our group at Dreamcatcher, our team, is mostly all people with acting backgrounds who also do improv. And I know a lot of times in the improv world, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So we have kind of a variety
we have a
of
nice
people on our
little
team.
pastiche.
Nice.
So and you were mentioning that we teach so we first started out performing improv ourselves, and then we started offering classes in it, and then we started offering it for corporations for business training. So that's like the newest of all the things that we do in improv, and it's really fun, and it's really growing, and people are finding us all the time and asking us to do these workshops, and that's like a whole different side of using improv, you know, aside from performance. And actually, a lot of the people who take our improv classes, the adults, are business people. So they're not, you know, like in New York, when you walk into an improv class, everyone there wants to be on Saturday Night Live. In New Jersey, they're more likely to, you know, want to try it for fun, or they want to do it to enhance their customer relation skills or spontaneous thinking, you know, that kind of thing.
Yes, if I can just add a little bit to that, or not add, but just kind of build on what you were saying about the people who come and take classes. I teach a lot of these classes, and so I often ask what their backgrounds are, if they've had any performing, and 99% of the people who take improv classes around here have never performed a day in their life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But they're looking for some confidence, you know, in their day jobs, or some, way to be creative. They take classes for a myriad of reasons, but it's usually like one of these, or they want to try something that scares them to death, right? And they just kind of want to overcome that. And then they're like, I did improv, check. I can cross that off the bucket list.
A lot of people will say that. Like, there's someone in my class right now who said, I turned 50, and I was like, I'm just going to do everything I want. And for her, that was improv. She was always curious, and she did it. And some people maybe are older but did it in college, and they've been kind of thinking about it all along.
Right, or like, they were big into drama, or it's like, a second chapter, kind of like, let me try this, or I want to get back into this, or rekindle that acting bug that they squashed out in their soul.
Yes, right. They want to get back to it. And a lot more people are hearing about improv. A lot of people come to it saying, I read an article about it, I heard Ellen Alda talk about it, and so they start thinking, oh, maybe this is something I'd like to try, and then they Google. You're right, and then they find Dreamcatcher.
I think it's like improv is kind of like, it's sort of like soccer, I think, in the way of that, like, a lot of sports are very intimidating. It's like football, you need all this equipment, or like basketball, you need like hoops. It's like soccer, you just need a field and a ball. And I feel like that's the improv. It's very approachable, because you're like, you don't need a lot, you don't need to have all this experience, or have like a theater with sets and lights and costumes. It's very easy to put up a show or just do a rehearsal. You just have to bring yourself and a good attitude, and it's very easy to produce or to participate in. It's not as intimidating of like, and like also the lines. I feel like everybody's like, you tell someone you're an actor, like, how do you memorize these lines?
Like, that's the hardest part.
But that's what everybody thinks, is that is the hardest, most insurmountable thing. And I feel like in improv, they're like, well, if there's no lines to memorize, then maybe I could do that.
Well, this might be a good time to define what improv is, just kind of give a little bit of a background. And I think most people have probably heard of, like, Whose Line Is It Anyway? But there's a difference between long form and short form. And
Yes. I'd like to just piggyback off of what Dave was saying, which is the word I was trying to think of earlier. I was trying to think of piggyback. It came to me. Oh, gosh. So Dave brought up soccer, right? And I feel that, or the best way I can explain improv to someone who's never done improv, who has no concept of improv, is to relate it to sports. Because improv and sports are similar in some ways. Sports is also improvised. Right? You don't know what you're going to do when you get out there. But there are certain things that you practice and drill that you kind of get into your body, so that when you are out there, you know how to respond in the moment. Especially with team sports, because in team sports, you need to learn to work with other people. You want to develop a kind of shorthand with other people, right? But you are guided by rules, structure. There are guidelines. So in improv, like, what would those be, right? Just embracing that idea of yes, right? Releasing control, that's the kind of thing that we would practice in class or rehearsal. How to be able to like pull up an emotion quickly, how to be able to pull up a character quickly. You know, just maybe we do it through physicality, like if you shift your posture, you know, then you can go into a character. You can find a character that way. And it's a lot of it is also just practicing putting yourself out there.
Getting comfortable with being
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Exactly, yeah. And you can see that progress happening relatively quickly because everybody is doing it together.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is super important, right? And when you feel like the support of the class, then you feel a little freer to take risks. Risks.
It's just two S's.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so anything you want to piggyback
I
on
also
top of that?
talk about sports in class a lot because I think there's a misconception when people watch improv comedy, like you watch Whose Line Is It Anyway, it feels like they're doing whatever they want, you know, and so people come to class like, I'm going to just do whatever I want, you know, and it just feels like they're going to be creative and they're just going to say stuff, and they don't understand that that freedom is based on this really kind of strong structure of these rules. Each game has really specific rules. And then the art of improv has really specific rules too. So the freedom that you get is by really strongly respecting each of those rules. And the wow that happens for the audience is they're doing all those things all at once. You know, that's the thrilling part. Is that it looks like it's free, but actually it's extremely technical. And I think that the first couple classes that, you know, whenever I'm teaching, I feel like the first couple classes are about that understanding. That, you know, and also the difference between like stand-up and improv is, you know, solo sport, team sport, you know, that it's not just about you being funny. If that's your jam, then you're a stand-up comedian, you know, and to understand the differences there are really important.
Yeah,
too.
people don't have as much license to be creative as they think. You know, there are some games or exercises where you really need to work as a team and kind of release your own ideas so that you can be working with everybody else. So that's another thing about, I'm funny, I'm creative, like you are on your own here, right?
Yeah.
You're not listening or being inspired by
Yeah.
what you hear and see. So that you need to train people to be in the present moment and really kind of taking in everything that's going on around them and picking up on all the clues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, ultimately, I think improv is just a form of theater. You know, it is like any, you know, it's a performance in front of other people, or, you know, maybe an acting style. You could sort of broadly put it in that category. But that just like any piece of theater, it's, it is very structured, and that it actually is very sort of regimented, and there's a lot of technique there. But that I think the biggest, most important thing is that like it isn't just like any show you've ever been in, like a piece of theater. There's sometimes there's hundreds of people to make a production, and that everybody has to, you know, do their part and play their part. And the lighting designer does their thing, and the actors do their thing. The director, everybody works together to bring, you know, the larger story to life. And that it isn't about me having the freedom to express myself. It's about working collaboratively with other people. And I think it's just like theater in that way. We do it very differently. We collaborate live in front of an audience, which makes it kind of a different experience. I think it's sort of what gives that feeling of like, wow, anything can happen. And anything can happen. But that a lot of it has been sort of in some way like practiced or thought about or done before. And, you know, it's like you perform with people for years and years, and you're kind of like, you get to know each other, and you can kind of give an eye to each other, like, I know what Lulu wants to do, or you kind of, you know, you have a sense of, or that you know, like, oh, Lulu has a great idea, I'm going to let her take the lead, and that I'm just going to sort of follow her idea along, and then add some of my stuff, and then she'll follow me, and you get a sense of how to, on the fly, collaborate with each other.
And we do very basic, like collaborative exercises in the beginning, and it actually helps to alleviate people's anxieties when they realize, oh, it's not about me coming up with something. Like they're so focused on each other and what the group objective is that they're like, oh, it's not just about me, it's about us and what we're creating together.
Which is very freeing.
Yes.
Very freeing.
Yeah.
And you teach beginner and intermediate classes? That's right. Could you tell me more about the difference between those and who might be able to sign up for those classes?
Yeah, sure. So anyone can sign up if you don't mind me taking it over. Right, the beginner classes are open to anyone. For the intermediate, it's recommended that you've had the beginner class,
Okay.
Or an equivalent, like in the recent times, right? Maybe
Like not 30 years ago.
Right,
I took a
it's like
class.
I took improv 20 years ago, like maybe a beginner course, because they think, oh, it's a beginner, I've got it, but it's an art, right? It's like I've experienced students who take the beginner class again, just to work on those foundational skills that are so important. Yeah.
And then
What
intermediate, it assumes that you have
right.
those
Yeah.
foundational. And I always think of it as layers of complexity. Because if you're in the beginner class, you're just trying to get a handle on some of the really kind of one thing at a time games.
Right.
But when you
yeah.
get to intermediate, I assume that you can keep lots of plates spinning at once. So that maybe there's a character, there's of course a location, and then there's a couple other rules you're handling, and all that's going to happen at the same time.
Yeah, it's mental juggling.
Yeah.
Like you call it plate spinning, I call it like juggling balls,
Yeah.
like if one's emotion and one's character and one's environment, and
Right.
yeah, there's like you just handle more in the more more advanced levels.
And I think it's so. We've been toying with the level question a lot recently because now the program's old enough that people have been through some of them, and how to continue to challenge people. Because truthfully, after 6 weeks, it's not like you're an expert. So I mean, you could take the beginner class a bunch of times, or you could take the intermediate class a bunch of times. But just kind of as the public sees it, how do they progress is the question, and how do we make sure that we're not shoving people through it just because they finish the 6 weeks, we want to keep them, we'll send them to some, we really want people to understand and to grow. So like, how do you achieve that? It's something we're talking
Yeah.
about as the program gets a little more mature.
Do you find, people keep taking the classes again?
Yes.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
do they go on to perform with your team or?
Not with our team. There have been
Okay.
teams that have sprung up from, classes.
Right, yeah,
Oh,
just
that's
people
great.
finding each other, taking classes together, and just kind of creating their own
We
thing.
just had Lulu produced a show just this weekend. and,
Right, in Maplewood at the
yeah,
Woodland.
Yeah, and it was great. It was really good. The flip side, our team performed there. But also, there were two teams that all those a majority of the improvisers, I guess, sort of
Yeah.
got their start at Dreamcatcher improv classes, and they've gone on to kind of form their own teams, and they're doing their own stuff. And yeah, it's really
great.
it's very cool
Yeah.
to see, actually, to be like, oh, cool, like.
Yeah, I feel like we're approaching some kind of a population swell where there will be more New Jersey teams, and I think that hopefully we'll figure out what to do about that.
Right.
And how to nurture that, how to give that platform. How do we do that? So I don't know. I feel like we're at the beginning of that, and I feel like it's happening.
I mean, Dave and I are very familiar with the New York City improv theater / school programs, right? And we don't necessarily want to emulate that, and I'm not sure there's the demand for that,
Yeah.
but it is a nice model to work off of, right?
Yeah.
So there were just the beginner classes, and now we have intermediate classes, and we're offering them more often because more people are coming back. So as there is demand, then it's like, well, how do we supply the opportunities that people are looking for?
Yeah.
And there is definitely a need, and you probably know this because I know you've taken class,
Yeah.
to get in front of a live audience at some point. So class
Yeah.
is really important, but at some point, part of your education is this is what it's like to do this live in front of people. So how do you
Yeah.
provide that experience too?
Yeah, there is a showcase at the end of the intermediate class, not the beginner one, because we don't want to, a lot of people aren't ready for that yet. But yeah, at the end of the intermediate class, then they can perform for their friends and family. It's very casual, but it gives them that
Yeah.
performance experience. And for all the students who are doing it for the first time, they're like, and then afterward, like, hey, that was fun, right? And then they learn, like, oh, wow, maybe I want to do more of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is such a different experience. It's good to have both the class experience and like being on stage and having all that fear and getting it out and seeing it's okay and
It is okay, and that's why I talk about that in class, because I want people to understand that the risk is quite low.
Yeah.
I mean, what is at stake here? Your ego.
Your
is,
ego.
That is,
Yeah,
and that's
pretty
big.
much.
I mean, we all have that. That's really large. But I think that the thing to remember is no one's going to die here. It's all very small stakes.
Yeah.
So that's why it's okay to play and even fail. So you had a terrible one of your games flopped. It's like, you know, and then the next one was great.
On to the
I-
next.
I think that, and that's something that I always try to stress to everybody that, whether I'm coaching or directing or teaching, that I always say, like, improv is the only thing that I've ever done in my entire life where failure can actually look like success. And it's so unique because it's like, if you get, Arnold Schwarzenegger and you do a terrible Arnold Schwarzenegger imitation, it can actually be funnier than doing a great Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's right. Yeah,
And
that is good.
It's so unique in that you can fail miserably, but that if you are, comfortable enough to really, kind of say to the audience, like, this is the best I got, and you throw yourself at it, and it kind of flops, that the audience can really appreciate that and be like, it was great, and that failing can be the greatest success. And watching a game kind of go completely off the rails and be like, well, that wasn't how we planned it at all.
Right.
Like, that those can sort of be like these magical moments, And
it's
I
all
had
about
a
commitment.
coach say to me once, it's not what goes right. It's the things that go wrong that you make look right, and that makes you a great improviser. And I always think about that. If like, it isn't what goes exactly the way it was supposed to. It's when things go totally wrong, but then as a team, you're able to find a way to support each other to make it look like even better than you could have ever planned it.
Because you have that idea of yes, right? You're just trying to think yes, right? That happened. Yes, of course it happened, right? Then what else, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also do, speaking of success and failure, do improv for business workshops. Could you tell me more about what you do there and why businesses bring you in? Yeah.
I mean, these are the guys who usually teach those workshops, but I'm the person on the telephone who books them.
Cool.
So usually you find that it kind of ranges. It's either like, we're just doing our annual meeting, we just want to have a good time. Like, they're going to be in seminars all day long. This is going to be the last thing they do. We just want to have a good time. And that's one kind of thing. But another is, it's like, one place called up and they said, we have a team that works nationally, so they're never in the same room. But they need to know each other well enough to really collaborate and communicate well. So for one day, these people are going to be in the same room. And so we want to build, team skills. We want to talk about communication. We want to get them to listen to each other and respond. Like that kind of thing we can absolutely do with improv. So I always do a lot of talking to them about what are you looking for, what are your goals, what do you hope to come away with, and then my job is to tell it to the people who are teaching the workshop, this is what they're looking for, and then they pick their own games, and I mean, you guys could talk about what it's like to go into those situations.
So then we custom create our curriculum to whatever their goals are. There are a variety of exercises that help build different skills. So it may be more teamwork based, maybe some stuff that's really fun and easy to do. I always approach these workshops as if no one has ever performed before. I want to make it feel really easy and doable, so that at the end they're like, oh wow, because they're usually pretty apprehensive. They didn't choose this.
Right, their manager
They
chose
didn't
it.
sign up for it. It's like, they're like, oh boy, an improv workshop. They're expecting something a little more, maybe touchy-feely or trust falls or something. But yeah, the goal is just to make it really fun and for them to interact with each other in a new way, and maybe have some takeaways that they feel are applicable to what they do. Maybe it's like, oh, this is a way to kind of brainstorm and get on the same page before a meeting. It might be that. Or just for some of them, it's just a lot of fun, right? Then they have something to talk about for a while.
Yeah.
It's a bonding experience no matter what happens.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
definitely. And I think like it is also always fun to sort of watch people slowly open up and loosen up and really start to play with each other. And like that's another thing that kind of always strikes me about improv is that you put a bunch of kids in a room and they will just sort of automatically start playing with each other. You're like, oh, that's really cool. But like as grown-ups, we would never do that. But that if you create this situation, it's like, it's okay to just sort of play and have fun and be yourself
There's
and be
very
silly.
little opportunity for that.
There's no opportunity for non-acting grown-ups. It's like,
Yeah, we're used to it because we're always.
it's like, whatever, let's play. But that it is, and that there, but that you see kind of these inner children sort of get to come out and be like, and that it is something fun. But then it also does awaken, that creative spirit inside of you, and that you can come at a problem or that, from all different angles, and, it helps work together and
Yeah.
build a team, and especially like creative problem solving, which so many companies are like, you have to, come up with a creative idea, and it can really help, I think, like start to at least build those bonds with people and help them sort of get outside of the box of this is a business and we
also,
have to think
I
analytically.
think one of the most valuable tools is what we were saying about one of the things is that anyone can have the best idea, and that you have to give up the idea that your idea has to be the one that everyone chooses. So in business, I mean, think how important that is. If you're on a team, to understand that anybody in the room could have the best idea,
Right,
and to really be
and
open.
that you can build on, that
Right.
you
That
bring a
there's
little
an
bit of an
and.
idea,
Yeah.
and then I can build off that, and then somebody else sees a
It doesn't
different
have to be
perspective.
fully
and-
formed. It could just be
Right.
something.
Yeah, and that's things can grow from a tiny little nothing of an idea.
Right.
Comes out of your mouth, and all of a sudden it inspires somebody else, and then all of a sudden, as a team, you discover together the best answer that none of you could have come up with individually.
Yeah, and I've heard from participants that sometimes they can be in a meeting and they're feeling anxious and they're not really listening because they're just thinking about what their thing is going to be, right? How can they, everybody listen to each other more? And it's, again, not just about your idea, but, how can you be inspired by what you get from somebody else? How can all of you help to build off one person's idea? Maybe that's the idea. It's what the team collectively builds, and then maybe you'd have another one that's just a spark of something, and then as opposed to like, is it this one, or this one, this one?
Like,
right?
who wins? Whose idea
Right.
wins?
Exactly.
All about that yes and, right?
Yep, that's right. And we haven't said yes and, right? I've said yes, but yes and is basically like the golden rule of improvisation, right? It's agreeing and adding.
What would you say to someone who's watching right now and might be thinking, oh, improv sounds cool, I might want to sign up,
Yep,
but they're a little bit nervous
should.
to take the plunge?
I would say the first step is like go and check out a show. I think
Yeah,
that
I
that's
was
sort of
gonna
the
say
best way. If you're like on the fence, you're like, that does sound, or if you've heard of it, come and watch. Come check out a show. And I think that you kind of, even watching a show, you have to participate, and like, it's very different than going to see like a piece of theater or a film or a stand-up comedian, because as an audience member, you really are a part of it, and you get to sort of feel some of that ride the wave with the actors on stage of like, wow, anything can happen. And like, I said canoe, and now they're doing a scene about a canoe. It's amazing. And I think that when you see that happen, and then you get into a class, you're like, oh, I can do that too. That it's really fun to, I think, get the whole journey. So I definitely think step one is come check out a show and sort of see what it's all about.
But also it's very normal to feel a little nervous before the first class. Everybody does, but it's our jobs as good improv instructors to help people feel more comfortable. So they don't need to feel like, oh, I need to get up and come up with something right away, because that's a bit of a myth with what you do in improv. It's not that. It's so much more than that, what we've been saying already.
I just also want to add, because a lot of people see Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV, that what they're seeing is an edited version of an extremely long show. So 100% of what they do is not brilliant, but the 25% that gets on TV is brilliant.
Like 4 hours to 20 minutes.
Right. So I think people should just remember that when they're seeing that show particularly, I mean, when you see a live show, you see it all. You see the ups, the downs, all the in-betweens, but on that TV show, I think people get intimidated, like, I could never do that. But, you could probably do some of the other stuff they're doing that, got cut out.
Yeah, well, and it's also like, live performance. I think it is remarkable, because when you watch something live, I don't know, it's very forgiving, and you remember just the overall experience.
Right.
But you go
And
back
the good parts.
Yeah, you remember all the good parts and what was hilariously funny, and the part you're just like,
Yeah,
forget that.
exactly.
yeah, that happened.
All right, well, thank you guys for being here today. It was great learning more about Dreamcatcher Rep. If you would like to learn more about Dreamcatcher Rep, be sure to check out their website, dreamcatcherrep.org, and follow them on social media at DreamCatcherRep. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today and might even be inspired to try improv yourself. You never know what can happen when you say yes and. Thank you for watching.